Good morning again. My name is Rick Taylor. I'm a senior technical architect with Proficient consultancy based out of St. Louis. I personally live in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, and so this is, I guess, my second or third time coming to the UK. I enjoy coming here. It's nice. I did not know that it was directly across from Westminster Abbey, so that was nice. So this session is about identity management in SharePoint. The purpose of this session is to help you understand where SharePoint fits into the whole identity management solution. Okay, identity management is not, although this is the SharePoint Best Practices Conference, identity management is overreaching. So SharePoint is just one piece of the identity management puzzle. And I'm going to be talking about the best practices to put identity management into the whole enterprise and where SharePoint fits into that. So a little bit about myself. Oh, are you going to do this to me now? Okay. Ground me. As I said, I'm with Proficient, formerly with the SharePoint architecture team at Microsoft. My customers were Coca-Cola Enterprises and Nokia, and I was working with the identity management solutions for them. So this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. Got a lot of bruises, still continue to get bruises. It is not an exact science, but then again, if you're dealing with SharePoint, not too much is an exact science. So all the rest of those are a couple of my blogs. I am not a very good blogger. I'll blog maybe once every 6 months or so. And there's like this, I'll blog once and it'll be like 5 or 6 all at once, and then you won't hear from me again for another 6 months. And then that's my Twitter tag. So the agenda for today, hello? Okay, we'll talk about what IDM or identity management is from a holistic perspective, and why is it important. This may be a new subject for a lot of people. It can get quite complex when you're dealing with a lot of different identity providers, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then how does SharePoint address the identity management problem space? Where does SharePoint fit? Where does it work very well? Where does it not work very well? Where does it need a proper identity management solution in order to function correctly? And then I'll talk about tools. One of the tools was talked about yesterday in Spence Harbar's session with the SharePoint Identity Management, or FIM. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then some of the best practices, which I will actually thread all throughout this presentation. So that's the agenda from a high level. Okay, identity management. Okay, we're all concerned about identity. We have dealt with identity since the beginning of time, it seems like. We have driver's licenses, passports, bank cards, ownership papers, all sorts of things to prove to someone we are who we say we are, and that we have the right to do whatever it is that that document or piece of, or that object says that we can do. That has always been a problem, having the correct documents and having them in order. For example, a classic identity management problem is usernames and passwords. Okay? We've been dealing with usernames and passwords ever since we've had the IT field. But think about it this way. A proper identity management solution would be making sure that the repository where all this information is held is a trusted source, and that we are passing these correct credentials to the people that, or systems that actually need it. And we should treat them all with the same amount of respect. And we don't do that. And that's where the problem exists. Think of it this way. Your bank card. How often or when was the last time you gave your bank card and PIN number to someone to go get money for you and bring it back? Now, you could change your PIN number, correct? But you don't think that's a best practice. Now, Let's look at it another way. How often have you asked or provided someone a username and password to get to a system? We don't treat those two things with the same amount of respect, and we should. And that's the problem. Now, the trusted system, right? It could be your brother, it could be your mom, it could be your dad, or whoever. You're still not going to give them your bank card and your PIN number. But you'll give your colleague the username and password to get to that system. Okay? We need to treat these with the same amount of respect. So we need to define what these things are and then come up with a plan in which we could manage these. Now, it's not just about who we trust, but it's about where these things are stored as well. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about where these systems are and what these systems are and how to manage all these different relationships. So first of all, identity management, we need to address a few things. Where these credentials are stored, the identity management store. We need to address how the information gets there, how do we get it out, and how do we pass it to another system. Okay, so authoritative source. If I were to have a driver's license issued to me, that source that issues me the driver's license is typically not going to be my butcher. The driver's license, or at least in the state of Arizona, it's the Department of Motor Vehicles that issues me a driver's license. It is the only authoritative source for obtaining the document which allows me to drive, which gives me the authority to drive a vehicle. Okay? Nowhere else in the state of Arizona can I get that. Okay? The federal government cannot issue me a driver's license. That is done by the state. So the state in this case is an authoritative source. Who monitors this? Supposedly the state. That's a problem because I don't know and most people don't. Okay? Your authoritative source for whatever the identity is needs to be not only authoritative, but you need to know who granted that system authority. Okay, the creation of that identity needs to be monitored and it needs to be audited. I'll give you an example. I was a trainer at a company and it was the least, you got the least amount of privileges that you needed. You didn't get any more than what the admin god said you could get, which was only enough to look at some of the directories that you had access to. Well, this was not enough for me, and it frustrated me because I'd always have to go to the admin to get anything. So I said, you know what? I need to get that username and password. Okay, where is that stored? It's stored on the domain controller, but I'm not a domain admin. So I can't really go to the authoritative source to get that unless I do what? Unless I hack my own network. Okay, so I hacked my own network. And I started monitoring and sniffing all the packets that were going through, and I found the admin password. To this day, I remember it. Jumanji. That was the password. Tolstoy was the username. So, what was the first thing you think I did? What was the first thing? If a hacker is going to hack your network for the admin username and password, what's the first thing they do? They don't do anything with it except for create another account. You don't want to do anything with that account because then they're going to change it. But if you know that that admin account is going to start creating, because that's the account that they use to create user accounts, hey, this account is just doing what it normally does. But instead of just creating a regular user account, what do you think I created? I created the God account. Yes, and I put him in the domain admins and gave him the same kind of name as all the other ones because they were all authors, Tolstoy. So I gave him one, Poe. Nevermore was the password. And I said, yes. So whenever I needed to do anything, I used that account. And you know what? It worked because no one practiced proper hygiene. They didn't audit those accounts. They felt that as long as it was hidden and no one could hack the network, everything was okay. But unless you monitor those and audit those regularly, you're not practicing proper hygiene. So best practice number 1, audit and monitor your user account, not just the admin accounts. Because there may be someone, a disgruntled employee, that creates themselves an account, and it's just normal. And you think it's going to fly under the radar because, oh, hey, where did this account come from? Well, it doesn't have any special rights. It must be a normal user account. Assumptions. You know what we say about assume, right? Makes an ass out of you and me. Okay, so monitor those accounts. Audit those accounts. If the account hasn't, find out when the last time they were being used. If they haven't been used very often, disable the account. Simple as that. Okay? All right, so identity management. There are what I call the 4 A's: authentication, authorization, access control, and auditing. Okay, now these 4 A's, if you practice these 4 A's, you will typically be on the right path to best practices in identity management. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about each of these, what I call the 4 A's, and how SharePoint 2010 addresses each of these. Okay, so authentication, okay, is typically the process of validating that someone or some other identity is who they claim to be. Okay, processes of authenticating someone typically comes down to a challenge and response. So it's going to challenge you for something that you know, it's going to challenge you for something that you have, or it may even challenge you for something that you are. For example, I used to work for Nestle, and the data center, which is in Phoenix, in order to get into the cages where the servers were, you had to produce all that information. Okay? First, when you're registering, you have to get a picture taken so that the security guard can match your face with the picture. Okay, so it looks like this person, but let's really figure out if they really are. Now you have to produce something that you have, such as a passport or a driver's license. Yep, it says it's this person. That picture looks just like this person, who looks like the person that's in this book. Okay, then you had to go in and there was a biometric scanner. So it checked your hand to make sure all the geos were the same, because, you know, I could put on one of those masks or whatever. Put your hand in there. Yep, same geometric thing as when he first registered. And then you walk through a glass door. And then you're in this glass cage, and you have to wait. And then you have to do it again with the other hand in order to get out. I don't know why they did that, but I guess but they tried to scare you because they said, oh, gas will come in and knock you out if you're the bad guy or whatever. So you do it again, and then it lets you into the next cage. Then it has a combination. Now, if you were the real person, then you would know what that combination was. It would let you into the key, it would let you into the next room. And you type in the combination, you get through there, and then you have to have then your own key that lets you into the cage. Okay? Several stages of authentication went through just in order to get to this stupid little server that was like a 386 with 4 gigs of RAM. Not even. Maybe 32 megs of RAM. That's how long ago it was. Okay, I'm an old guy. Okay, that's what we had to go through. Hey, that was the steps of authentication. But we're typically familiar with challenge and response. Username, passwords, that sort of a thing. Okay, now, in identity management, that is probably what we would say is par for the course. Okay, let's go. Now, in SharePoint 2010, as most of us know, claims authentication has been integrated into the product. So claims-based authentication works as, I got a token, it's got some information about this user who is trying to log in, and they use that token throughout SharePoint in order to verify that you are who you say you are. Okay, so a name may be part of the claim, an age may be part of the claim, and so on and so forth. Okay, now the way that it works, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but the tokens are issued by the Security Token Service, the STS. Okay, that is created in response to an authentication request by the browser on behalf of the user that is logging on. Okay, now the request for this authentication goes through a number of different scenarios. It can go through a bunch of different scenarios like a Kerberos ticket or something like that. The Security Token Service then will request information about that user from the attribute store, which will be, in SharePoint's case, typically Active Directory. And then that token will be issued and returned back to the browser, and I carry this token around wherever I go. Now, in SharePoint 2010, the Windows Identity Foundation is what makes this all kind of work. And I think it's the first real application for Windows Identity Foundation, if I'm not mistaken. So we're actually, yeah, Windows Identity Foundation, right. What app have you got? SharePoint. Beautiful. What other ones do we have? That's it. But that's okay. There will be other ones. WIF is also the foundation for ADFS. So anyone using ADFS now? You liking that? No? I hear you, man. I hear you. But you know what? Sometimes you got to use it. And I'm going to show you a scenario in which I've used it for a major manufacturer in the United States. Okay, so also the WIF is also used to allow developers to create their own security tokens. Okay, so a little bit about claims. Okay, so there's claims and there's attributes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these. Okay, the benefits of using claims, okay, comes from the ability that it gives us to create applications that determine which claims are going to be authoritative. What providers are we going to trust? For example, let's say that Facebook says, my name is Slick Rick. Cool. But I also participate in another website called eHarmony. And eHarmony says, well, his name is Rick Taylor. Okay, so these are two different claims. Depending upon which one of these sites I trust is where the power of claims comes in. Because they could both be right or they could both be wrong, or one could be right and one could be wrong, but depending upon who I'm going to trust, it works. Okay, it's really cool. In claims-based scenarios, you decide which one you're going to trust. Okay, Facebook says I'm 45, eHarmony says I'm 29. Hey, that's the way it works. Okay, authorization decisions then depend upon what app you're going to trust. So if I'm going to trust eHarmony, guess what? He's 25 years old. If I trust Facebook, he's 45 years old. So it has really nothing to do with the technical capability. It all has to do with the applications scenario, depending upon what's the scenario. Here's a scenario that I use for our manufacturer. We have a bunch of different systems on the back end. We've got SAP, Oracle, and so on and so forth. This information that resides on these back-end systems all contain very similar attributes. For example, the name attribute. The name attribute for one system has to use the first letter of your first name and the first letter of your surname. The other system uses your full given name and the first letter of your surname. They're different. Depending upon which one of those applications you need access to, you have to provide the correct information. So depending upon the application, which one of those repositories are you going to trust? Now, here's another scenario on top of that. When the client says, we want to homogenize all that information all the way across all our back-end systems. So now, we want to use first letter of the given name and the full surname. Okay, that means all the other systems that use anything different have to be changed. Can you do this like in 40 hours? depending upon how many users you've got, like more than 5, it's going to take you a while, because some of these systems don't like that. Okay? So I'll talk a little bit about how we can go through and make these a little bit more happy. Okay? Today, 1:45, I think it's Spence that's going to talk about multi-tenancy, and he's going to go a little bit more into claims than I am. I'm kind of high level, but he's going to go a little bit more in how it applies in the multi-tenancy fields. Okay. Okay, so to kind of reiterate, the benefits of using a claims-based system, in the case of SharePoint, it allows us more than one authentication scenario. So if I had a URL or some web app, for example, sharepoint.contoso.com, I can have more than just one method of authentication, which is really nice. Okay, so if we're going to explore the concept of claims providers, we basically got 2 APIs. We've got augmentation and we've got resolution. Okay, so with augmentation, we've got, we build an application on SharePoint, for example, and I want to expose these claims. And I want to put a piece of code into SharePoint, like a CRM system, and it authorizes the sales manager, this person, he's a sales manager, I want to apply this role, I want to expose the claims that this person is making. Okay, so in SharePoint 2007, what we would do is we would use a security group. We would create a security group that was called Sales Manager. Anybody that was in Sales Manager then is supposedly that kind of a deal, right? And then we write a synchronization engine, and then it copies that roles into that SharePoint group. User then logs in, provides that claim, and there you go. Now, we've got some new scenarios in which you could take those roles directly and create a token for that security role, and we can use databases, for example, and we can write our own piece of code that will expose that claim. Okay, another scenario is searching and resolving for claims. So basically, a user is going to use the principal picker, and they need to say, I want to find this user, or I'm going to look for something, I'm going to use search. And what that does is it says, okay, what claims are you making? I'm going to show you a result of your search query based upon the claims that you're making. Okay, so that's a scenario for that. All right. Oh, also 11:30 p.m. No, that's 11:30 a.m. Best practice for working with the claims provider. I believe that's Paul Schaefline. Okay, so if you want to know how to write a claims viewer web part, he will be talking about that. Okay, authorization. Okay, or auth-z. Do you have permission to do X? Okay, now authorization is typically the classic way that we handle authorization in identity management is through the use of ACLs, which may not be the most, shouldn't be the, sometimes it's not the best way to handle that. Imagine if you've got 10,000 users and you've got custom rights that need to go for a certain site, and then I've got a customer now, to this day, we're still in the project. They've got about 12,000 users, and they have approximately 60 global groups. And people are members of these global groups forever, and they're saying, well, should we use AD groups or should we use SharePoint groups? Okay, so that's a whole nother discussion. Okay, should we use a mixture of them? Well, it depends on what we want to do. Just the discussion about how to handle those many users and those groups is a long discussion, let alone how to implement that. So authorization is a big deal. So what we did was we expanded the idea of authorization into role-based access control, which actually falls in under the third A. Okay? Using policy-based access control, we were able to better identify what it was that the users needed. Okay, because if you try to manage the ACLs for all the users and those resources, let me tell you, you're going to pull your hair out. And I don't have too much, I mean, it's hard to pull my hair out. and it's painful. Okay, so using the RBAC system is, in my opinion, the better way to go. Okay, it is a standard by the NIST, and if you have a need for a lot of users and you've got a lot of resources and you have to give access to them based upon roles, using a role-based access control system is the best way to go. Okay, so typically you've got users, roles, permissions, objects, and operations. Okay, so everybody's got users. Okay, there may be some roles, so define what those roles are. And then assign those roles permissions these roles will then be able to do certain things. So, for example, if I am a member, I'm working with the pharmaceutical company. They've got the Minister of Health, then they've got a Minister of, or some other doctor that does something. So the role for one person is, okay, I've looked at this drug, and this drug passes all the tests that it needs to so that it's safe and it won't kill a lot of people. The next one is, okay, this is okay for mass production, and then this person says, okay, it's got our stamp of approval. So those are 3 distinct roles in this particular pharma company. So what can the doctor do? The doctor can perform tests. The doctor can perform trials. The doctor can report these and has access to do these certain things. Those are the operations. This person's role is to look at the results that the doctor did and to assimilate them and say, okay, I've looked at this, I've done this, and here are the results. We're able to do the next step, and the other person's got the roles to do whatever. And each of those roles then actually rolls up into the next one. So anything that the first person can do, or the first person can do, the second person can do, and so on and so forth. So mapping these all out is really, really important. Okay, so the best practice is don't look at the object itself. Who should have rights to this particular doc or this doc lib or this list? But look at the roles and what they do and base that upon what it is that they do. Okay, so best practices. Your identity management system, if you look at a solution for IDM, okay, it should be possible to do a few things. Okay, delegate all permissions, change passwords, augment or trim security groups and roles, automate the whole process, a number of different things. So your identity management solution should include all of this. If you look at SharePoint out of the box, you can only do actually certain things. You can't create users in SharePoint. I mean, you can create SharePoint groups, but as far as discrete objects that have permissions, that's done from whatever identity provider that you're using. Okay, and changing passwords, you typically don't do that in SharePoint. Auditing, you typically don't. You can do some of these things in SharePoint, but typically you don't. So your identity management solution should include the ability to do all of these different things. And approve and reject requests. Not just, for example, from a workflow, but let's say that I want a user to get access to this. It should all work seamlessly. Okay, user account lifecycle management, provisioning, decommissioning. I mean, how many times have, I've got a customer now, they create a site, and it's for a project, and then after the project is done, they leave it. And then it's for the SharePoint admin to go ahead and clean up all of this, but then what happens? Oh, really, I wanted to get that information that was at that site, but now the site's gone. Can you go back and get it? There's got to be an automatic process. You want to be able to manage the state of that site, a user account, a system, a service account, whatever it is. Okay, self-service, delegated administration, all of that information needs to be able to be automated. Okay, so allow your solution to have good personalization. It should be scalable. I should be able to go from one system to the next system so that whatever solution that I use in prod, I should be able to use in QA, I should be able to use in dev. It should be the same way all the way across. Okay, identity management also should support VPNs. Okay, for example, had a customer previously that these user accounts were only good, they didn't have VPN rights. So I couldn't log in as that person's account to test whether something would work. So you've got to make sure that the user accounts will work all the way from end to end. Okay, also support different PKI and SSO solutions. Now, challenges, not just technical, okay? You will have technical challenges. That's a given. But there will be other challenges. Okay, a lot of times they point the fingers at, well, that's not our job, that's somebody else's job. Okay, what are some of the challenges that we face? Because the business is the one that is actually paying the bills, right? They're paying for us to come in and give them a solution. They're not only doing that, they're also paying for the software, they're paying for all of that information. So they should have some kind of voice when it comes to choosing an identity management solution. Now, being a techie guy, I need to protect my own interest in that the solution that the business has or their business requirements is not going to cause me too much pain. A little bit of pain is okay. A lot of pain is not okay. You know, don't have a lot of business requirements that are going to cause me to, you know, do a whole bunch of things that may or may not be necessary. So there's going to be a lot of talking back and forth. Okay? The two biggest things I think are probably the lack of understanding of a technology to implement a solution. You could go and, you know, read some blog posts, go to TechNet or whatever. That's one thing. Okay? The bigger problem is the lack of planning. We talk about planning. I think the number one session, the number one sessions at all SharePoint conferences, no matter what one, they talk about planning. Why do we talk about planning so much? Because we suck at it. We're just really bad at it. We think we spend a lot of time planning, but we just haven't got it right. You know what the evidence of this is? That's why we have a best practices conference. Because we're so bad. We want to go there and learn how to get it right. You know, and it is an iterative process. We're gonna get it wrong, and then we get a little bit better, but we're gonna need to know a little bit more to get it better. That's just the way it is. Either way, okay, the cost is just, it's going to cost us in order to learn this. Okay, the business has got its own problems, right? Who's going to own this stuff? The political problems. Who do I report to for this? Legal concerns, compliance. These are all part of the identity management challenges that we have. Okay. Okay, SharePoint. Industry practices actually for SharePoint haven't been established. It's only been out for about a year. So best practices is kind of like best practices. Hasn't been out that long. Identity management, what really works better than something else, hasn't really been identified yet. Microsoft does recommend that to place separate SharePoint sites, instance, and a DMZ to host the content for an extranet access. But you know, that may create a data synchronization challenge. So, you know, hey, as far as identity management is concerned, there are some solutions, there are some tools that we can use. Are they the best practice? It still remains to be seen. So, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I have used and I have done, and they seem to work so far pretty good. I'm still employed, so that's a good thing. Okay, so what's the purpose of an IDM solution? Okay, I want to streamline. I want to make things easy. I'll give you an example. In my house, where I live, I have 4 children. And these kids, you know, all right, they're mine. And so I'm really hard on them because I want them to do the best they can in school and so on and so forth. And I travel pretty extensively, and I'm not present to check their homework as often as I would like. So I like to streamline the process. So we have a process at home where every day at 1600 hours, I get an alert It lets me know how they're doing. Because if they hand in their homework, if they're missing homework, I get an alert. And it just shows me, okay, Rebecca is missing an assignment in science. How do we know this? Okay, so I use SharePoint in my house. I've used SharePoint in my house for a number of years, actually since 2001. It's beautiful. It is an enterprise application, yes. Now, I've been trying to convince Microsoft that it's also a commercial product, but they laugh at me. Okay, fine. It works beautifully. This is what happens. I got SharePoint installed. Everybody has their own computer. Everybody has their own user account. I create a SharePoint site. Everybody's got their own. There's a document library up there. All of the schoolwork is online. So whatever, math, science, English, you can go online to whoever the publisher is, get the homework, right? PDF form. They can download it to their computer, they can do it, and they upload it. Kicks off a workflow. When it's handed in, I know that the work is good to go. If they forget it, not a problem. They send me a little email, Dad, I forgot my homework. Can you shoot an email to my teacher? Not a problem. I go to the document library, shoot the email to the teacher. There's the homework. Because that way they can't say the dog ate it, because there it is. Now, let's suppose Rachel didn't do her homework. Okay, she calls me up and she says, Dad, can I go over to Ashley's house? Is your homework done? Yeah. I didn't get an alert. I'm almost done. Well, when it's done, I'll know. Now, the problem comes when Dad's system, as good as it is, fails, right? I handed it in, and the workflow didn't kick off, and then Dad looks like a bad techie because the workflow is broke, and okay. And then the grades are all that way, so it works out perfectly. So when the teacher gets the homework, whatever, and then I can go and see their grade, and you're like, hey, you need to work a little bit in this subject, whatever. Now, I don't have an identity management issue in my particular case at home. Okay, it's more of a technical issue, but I like to streamline that whole process. I don't want to have to go every single. Now, my son is a little bit different because he goes to a different school, so I actually have to sit down there and look at each one of the things and sign to that. I hate that. I want it all automated. I want everything automated. I wake up automated. The only thing I don't get is I wish food would just come and drop in my mouth in the morning so I can get up. I want it all that way. I want to push the button and it's beautiful. That's the way I like it. Okay, so that's the way I would like to design my identity management. I want someone who, okay, anyone here work for Microsoft or have ever worked for Microsoft? Okay, so when you get a job with Microsoft, it is beautiful. It's the most beautiful process I've ever seen. That's probably the reason why I want to automate my whole life like that. It's beautiful. Not one piece of paper. Nothing. You apply for the job, you get an email saying, yep, send us a copy of your resume, you send the copy of the resume. Yep, we got a copy of your resume, you look pretty good, we're going to give you an interview. Phone call. You go through the phone call, yep, we like this guy. They send off a little email to their boss saying, yep, we like this person, can you interview them for a loop? Yep, they kick off another process that tells HR, send this person a plane ticket. You get an email saying, be on the plane, show up. You show up, the little van comes. They give you some candy when you get in the van. They take you around to the loop. You go and you get off and you walk in there. And then you sit down with the guy or girl, whoever. They interview you. They like it. They're typing in all the information. And they hit click, and it goes to the next person who's in your loop. So by the time you get there, they already see the results of all your... So like if you're doing bad, hey, it's a snowball. It's ugly. Okay, and let me tell you, if you ever interview with Microsoft, it's grueling. Matter of fact, any of you ever heard of Bill Baer? Okay, so Bill Baer is a SharePoint architect, MCM instructor. He was one of the persons that interviewed me. He didn't say one word. Matter of fact, I didn't even know what Bill looked like until I showed up with the job. He sat behind this big monitor, and I could just hear him typing. And I sat there, and he just, for about 15 minutes, and he says, yeah, I've read your blog. I don't like you already because you're a Bears fan. That was the only thing he said to me. And I figured, okay, I might as well go home now. And I went home, and then they offered me the job, which was kind of funny, but yeah, I mean, that was it. So, yeah, it's grueling. I mean, because they play with your mind like that. But yes, and then once you get the job, they say, congratulations, this is how much money you're going to make. Just click here if you accept. You click there, thing goes all off. They said, okay, we're going to relocate you to Redmond. Everything, streamlined. You just click yes, no, whatever, reply, not one piece of paper. It's beautiful. Love that. Now, if buying a house or a car were like that, oh, beautiful. It's beautiful. So IDM solutions, same way. Okay, it should be totally just, I shouldn't have to look at anything. Okay, so there are some tools that will help you. Okay, Forefront Identity Manager. Okay, yesterday Spence Harbar talked about the evolution of the Forefront Identity Manager, which came from Zoomit, VIA, and came through MIIS, ILM. Now, my first foray into identity management came at Microsoft, where SharePoint Online. So it's kind of a convoluted process, but let's say Coca-Cola wants to use BPOS, which is what we called it then. I don't know what they call it now. Whatever. Oh, it's 365, whatever. The name of my group, I was at Microsoft. In 6 months, the name of my group changed 4 times. So whatever they call it now, okay, in the cloud, SharePoint in the cloud. So they've already got their Active Directory. So what they're going to do is we're going to create SharePoint in the cloud for you, and we're going to allow your users access to SharePoint. So we've got a forest, you've got a forest. Well, that means our forest has to trust your forest because your users are not going to actually be over here. And so what they had this product called Mississippi, which was MIIS with another product that they home grew, because it was not just SharePoint, but it was Exchange and a whole bunch of other things. So what it did was it allowed those identities access to all the stuff that was in Microsoft's realm. Okay. Now what we had to do for, it wasn't Coca-Cola, it was Nokia. They had a Novell system, and the only thing that they used Active Directory for was for usernames and passwords, the login. All of their user profile information was held in this Novell directory, Novell E-directory, something, MEDI they called it. And so we had to come up with a solution that was going to allow SharePoint, this is 2003, to pull that profile information from NetI. Okay, a mess. So that was where I learned ILM. Actually, it was MIIS at that time. So SharePoint, as Spence said yesterday, has a scaled-down version of FIM. Okay, so FIM does a whole bunch of things, but as he explained yesterday, it doesn't do a full sync. So I can't, change certain things in SharePoint and have it right back to Active Directory. I can't sync with foreign directories as well. Okay, now Forefront Identity Manager has the full fidelity, right? I can sync with foreign identities, I can account provision, I can deprovision accounts, I can do a whole bunch of things. So I really enjoy Forefront. Okay, so the FIM, 2 major components. You've got the FIM Manager Service, and you've got the Synchronization Service. Okay, there are some things about SharePoint FIM that I don't think Spence covered, but I'll cover here in a minute. Here's, I think he gave a little demo of this. Okay, if you want to check it out, you can, if you go to SharePoint and you go to this is the default path, you can go ahead and look at the MIIS client and then perform little tests on user accounts, for example, and he showed you how to do that. Now, the management agents tab gives you a few things. There are some FIM service management agents. That one actually isn't used. The MOS, followed by the huge grid, that's an extensible connectivity. That connector is meant to find all the other management agents that you want to. SharePoint 2010, you can add one user profile service per profile service synchronization service. There are some pretty cool things that you could do with SharePoint FIM, but it is kind of watered down. But if you want the full deal, you need to really go to FIM. Users, profiles, my sites. I think Paul Stork has a subject. He's going to really go into talking about this. I think it's tomorrow at 9 a.m. So if you're interested in seeing this more and some demos, then show up to his session. Okay, so Forefront Identity Manager is basically, this is kind of like the bread and butter. This is where I work with my clients. They've got a whole bunch of back-end systems, and they've got user accounts, and they want to somehow consolidate them, or they want to automatically provision or deprovision user accounts, and they want to homogenize all of those identities across the different systems. So Forefront Identity Manager is what I use. Hey, now there are different components to FIM. Okay, so there is a FIM portal, which can allow self-service integration. So a lot of the IT admins, their biggest, one of the biggest things that they deal with are password resets. So using the FIM portal, you can automate that. So if a user forgets their password, they don't have to call the IT help desk. Okay, using FIM, they can say, you know what, I want to change my password. So what happens is FIM will say, okay, I need to authenticate you, right? So there's a challenge response. They're going to ask you questions that you created and that you gave the answers to. So it's almost like a PIN. They're going to ask you 3 questions. Where did you grow up? What's your mom's middle name? Or whatever questions you came up with. Once you answer those questions successfully, it resets your password to whatever password that you want. So that saves a call to the IT help desk. So that's just one of the things that you can do. Another thing with Forefront Identity Manager is this is how Microsoft actually creates the brand new user in HR. Right? HR says, okay, they get an email from the hiring manager saying, yep, Rick Taylor is good to go. He's going to start on April 30th. Please create him a user account. HR doesn't have to do anything but click a button. Create a new user. User account gets created. Another email gets sent to the Exchange team. A mailbox gets created. Another email goes to whoever, and they create whatever it is that you need. And then when you show up, all they'd have to do is take a picture, put it on your badge, and woohoo, you're in the matrix. That's beautiful. Okay, on-premise, it supports the on-premise applications, supplies ADFS for data. So how have I used it? I had a manufacturing client which they had carriers, users, and vendors. So what they did was they had an internal SharePoint site, and the users could log on to that. But what they wanted to do was create a site for their carriers. So what a carrier is they sold fiberglass to large warehouses like Home Depot, Lowe's, and so on and so forth. So they could log in using what they called the SCAT code. And that SCAT code was how it identified that particular identity. And that SCAT code had different attributes. So that code told them where in the United States they were, how large they were, how much stuff they could buy, and the type of materials that they were allowed to buy. So all of the authentication and authorization were built into that role. They used the role-based access control. So what we did was we used FIM to, when they came in and they logged in using that code, if they were brand new, it created a new identity for them on the back-end system. And it verified them, and they'd have to type in their phone number, and then once they had the phone number, an email got sent to the verification department, so find out how much credit they could have based upon how much they were going to buy, and then they would make a call, they'd verify that, and it just all worked all very stream-based. It was very, very nice. Okay, so what this allows us to do now, okay, so these are different parts of FIM. So if you install FIM, there's a portal, there's a FIM service, sync service, and then if you use certificates, there's a certificate management service. And it's tied into Active Directory and also into any, if you may have a different identity provider database such as Novell or something like that. You can also use claims. Well, in this case, we use claims. And it also went through the ADFS. We typed in what the relying party was. In this case, it was SharePoint. And then the web client. So the user would come in through a web client. They would hit the Forefront Unified Access Gateway. They would log in with their SCAT code, make sure everything was good to go. It would identify who they were, what rights they had, whatever claims they were making, and they would send that token to wherever it was that they were going. It was very, very nice. And this is what the portal page kind of looks like. So this is actually me installing it. So when I installed it, right, I'm FIM install user, this is what the page kind of looks like. So I can create a new distribution group, I can create a new security group. I've got people, profiles, passwords, requests. All of that can be configured right here. This is kind of like the portal. So this is where you would actually set up your whole streamlined identity management solution. Does this fit in? Okay, and then flow types. I'm not going to go too much into this. There's another session that actually goes into FIM. Michael Knowles session. I'm not sure what day that is. But he actually goes into and does a demo on the FIM portal. And then some of these authentication, authorization, how that all works when you're going through FIM. So password resets, request and update attributes, and so forth. Okay, so how does this all kind of work in the solutions that I was? Okay, so in provisioning, there's a built-in workflow for the identity management. So the user comes in, whoops, let me go back. Okay, the manager says, you know what, the person's been okay for whatever, we're going to get them hired. The user enrolls in there, the workflow gets kicked off, their user is created. If they've got if you're using Lotus, got a Domino account, any other kind of directory, SQL Server account, and so on and so forth. That all happens in FIM, and FIM keeps everything in sync. So you don't have to go to each one of those different systems to make, because I mean before that's how you had to do it. You had to go to each system and then update those. FIM makes sure that all of that is all nice. Okay, for example, remember how the system, I said you had the first letter of your given name and your whole surname. If it was ever different, this is how FIM changes that. So let's say I've got an HR system, I've got a SQL Server, I've got Active Directory Exchange or whatever, I've got all these different directories, and the attributes are, let's say, first name, surname, employee ID, title, email, telephone. Let's say that they're all different. Okay? If they're all different and I want to homogenize this across all my different systems, I can use FIM to do that. So basically what happens is I'm going to take that information, determine what is going to be the authoritative source. I'm going to go ahead and create that in the metaverse. The identity data aggregations where everything is going to get all synchronized. And then once I say, okay, I've got everything the way I want it, I'm going to now push that out to where that information is missing or it's incorrect. So now I'm going to push all that information out, and now it's identical across all my systems. So no matter where I go, that information is the same everywhere. Okay, that's what FIM does. I can do the same thing with the deprovision. So once I say, you know what, this user has moved on to something else, bigger and better, in SharePoint now I got to remove these users and whatever, use PowerShell scripts so that I can remove them. Now it's a piece of cake. Go to FIM, say, you know what, deprovision this user, and they're pulled out from everywhere. Okay, and it's real time, so it's immediate. Okay, profile management is also done from the portal. So I click on my profile, that will take me to me, or I can go to a specific user and edit that profile. This is how I can extend my Active Directory using ADFS. Okay, so I've got a partner, let's say, and they're using some claims-based aware application. They log in. ADFS, what happens is the user logs in. They type HTTPS, whatever name of the portal. And then what happens is they get a little login. When they type in their username and password, what happens is those credentials then get passed to the ADFS server. ADFS says, okay, what claims is this person making? Who is this person? He takes that information. He goes to Active Directory, makes sure that the username and password match. Okay, cool. Comes back to ADFS, creates all those, a token from all the claims that they're making, sends it back to the browser, which goes back to the user, and the user then goes ahead and passes that through. Now, what's cool with the federated services is that in this case, or in the case of my client, they've got an Active Directory, and there's an Active Directory that's sitting out here in the cloud. They're going to take that information, and those two servers are going to talk and say, yep, this is the same person. These are the claims that they're making over here. We're going to accept those claims. Will you accept these claims? Yes. And then they create that token, and the user's good to go. I'm not sure who is talking about extranet environments, but tomorrow at 10:15. Oh, you know what? I think this is Michael Knoll's session, so that he'll actually do a demo on this. Okay, so SharePoint FIM versus regular FIM. Now, there was a comment made yesterday about the supportability, and which actually came as a surprise to me, about using SharePoint FIM versus regular FIM. And the options that you're creating when you're configuring SharePoint, you have two options: use SharePoint FIM or use regular FIM. And the comment was made that if you choose the second one, you become unsupported, which was news to me because I've done that many, many, many times. And we've actually done that with Microsoft. So if it is supported, they're telling me to be unsupported. So that's kind of distressing. So I'll have to actually go back and figure out what's going on here. But because it doesn't work, the solution doesn't work any other way. If I want to synchronize my back-end systems and then use SharePoint to actually pull that information in, there is no other way. So anyway, supported and what is not supported in these different versions. Okay, creation and management of profile identities. You can't do that with SharePoint FIM. You must use regular FIM. Okay, automated replication of user profile information across your systems. You have to use regular FIM. Okay, there is no other way to do it. All right, so if you have to make a choice, when do you use one versus the other? Okay, that's the question. If I have different back-end systems that are heterogeneous, and I need to take that information and surface it in SharePoint, I must use full FIM. I can't use SharePoint FIM. Okay, there is just no other way to do that. Okay, so that's that's typically, you know, should we use regular FIM or should we use SharePoint FIM? If I have back-end systems that are different and I have to bring that information in, full FIM. Simple as that. Okay, some of the caveats. All right, so SharePoint, you cannot install FIM on SharePoint 2010. Okay, when you install FIM, it's going to create WSS 3.0. Okay, or 2007. So what does that mean? That means if I've got a 2010 environment and I want to use full FIM, I'm going to introduce WSS 3.0 into that mix. Okay, that's just the way it is. Okay, I can't use SQL Server Express. I have to use full-blown SQL. Will not install. It does not install on Small Business Server either. Okay, I can't use both. I must use one or the other in the options. Okay, will it allow you to? Yeah, but you'll break it. For example, if I say I want to use SharePoint FIM and I try to bring regular FIM into the mix, it's not going to work. I have to say I'm going to use regular FIM and then point SharePoint to it. and then it will work. All right. So, conclusion. Okay, a good identity management solution, I should be able to define the identity. I should be able to trust the repository where those identities are. I should be able to streamline those. I should be able to follow the 4 A's: authentication, authorization, access, and auditing. Make sure, if you walk away with anything today from this session, go back and make sure that you know who's who gave them the right to do that, and you monitor it. Do those 3 things. When you walk away from this session, you go back to where you work, do those 3 things, and you will do a world of good. I guarantee you, you will be surprised. You will be surprised, unless you're the one who created them all. Okay? And you'll start asking questions. That's a good start. Okay? Your IDM solution should be resilient, it should be distributed, and it should be highly available. And make sure that whatever solution that you use, if it's good, okay, shouldn't be that complex. The easier it is, I had a physics professor who told me, you know when you understand something when you can explain it to a 5-year-old. If you can't explain it to someone who doesn't understand what you do, something's wrong, or it's just too complex. So make sure that you keep it simple. Okay, one other thing I'd like to thank these 3 people. I don't even know if they're here or not, but I stand on the shoulders of giants. Okay, there are a lot of very, very smart people in this world and in the SharePoint community, and I just wanted to thank these 3 people because they know a lot about identity management. And so I just wanted to publicly thank them. I don't even know if they know that I'm thanking them, but just wanted to thank them. Okay, so I believe I finished just on time even. So thank you for attending this session. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and you have a good day.